I got a quick one for you today. You might hear some dogs in the background. Don't mind it. So I came across this article on the site Today in BC, British Columbia. It's, the province in Canada I live in. So today in BC, they're talking about a global problem. This is a global problem which threatens not only the safety and well-being of journalists, but the proper functioning of democracy itself. Enough is enough. We need bipartisan action now. What is this threat to democracy? Well, I guess we already gave it away, but Black Press Media joins 46 media outlets to call for a plan to protect journalists against hate and threats. Led by the Canadian Association of Journalists, police and the federal government need to do more to protect reporters. That's right, we have a new oppressed group. I think they've been historically marginalized or something like that. We need equality. Am I doing it right? So this is 47 journalist associations, and they're petitioning the Prime Minister and 13 MPs, different politicians, and party leaders to develop plans to protect journalists against hate and threats to our safety. Remember, these are the journalists that received $500 million, was it? Dollars of taxpayer money a year or so ago. They got, I think, a bit more. I can't even tell you how much money Trudeau's been handing out to these media outlets, but reporting has sure changed since he started dishing it out. Dear Prime Minister Trudeau, we are writing in relation to the increasing and alarming online hate and harassment targeting journalists and journalism as a profession. This is a global problem which threatens not only the safety and well-being of journalists, a global problem, by the way. I wonder how it is that the entire world can be wrong and this small cabal of journalists, they're the ones who are right. So it threatens not only the safety and well-being of journalists, but the proper functioning of democracy itself. Many countries are now working on plans to fight back. We are calling on Canadian police and policymakers to do the same. We're going to get the police involved on hating journalists. For the most part, these attacks are aimed at racialized and female journalists who are experiencing an increasing number of targeted, vile threats of violence. The trend is clear. I'm sure that has nothing to do with expressing radical ideas on prominent social media sites where they can get a huge array of responses, not even from their constituents or even their country. And the next point here in their letter to Prime Minister Trudeau, the next part kind of reveals that that's exactly what's going on. In a 2021 Ipsos survey of journalists, 72, by the way, survey, anything that's a survey, you can throw it right in the trash. That's the 1 in 3 and 1 in 4 rape stat that you see on college campuses. That was a survey. Of course, the biggest problem with surveys being selection bias. So you've surveyed journalists, but you haven't given the percentage of people from the general population, or say the percentage of constant social media users. So 72% of respondents said that they had experienced some form of online harassment. How about you? You ever been harassed? I bet you 72% of you have. At the same time, the CAJ, Canadian Association of Journalists, I think that is, co-signed a statement with many Canadian media organizations affirming that there can be no tolerance for hate and harassment of journalists or for incitement of attacks on journalists for doing their jobs. We see the way the word attack is used these days. Trump attacks this, so-and-so attacks that. It's any negative response, a counter argument, interjecting your own point of view. Those are all attacks these days, not bombings, not shootings, because when are any of those things happening? All the female, women journalists of color being targeted by the Canadian right-wing death squads. I don't see that. I can show you some journalists getting beat up by Antifa, though, in Canada, as well as the US. Yet, the problem grows. The volume and nature of the rhetoric in the recent string of attacks has caused many journalists, as well as their respective organizations, to fear for their safety. I suppose they're making sandbags out of the dead bodies right now. So we are asking police forces to take several immediate steps to address the current incidents and to work with our organizations to combat abuse of journalists and all victims of online hate and harassment. Turn off the computer, nigga. First, many of the threatening emails use similar language. The language commonly used by domestic extremist groups. Very, very specific, great reporting. Are they all signed Pepe? Do they have the OK symbol? Maybe they just have good spelling and punctuation. They're grammar Nazis. Yet, because forces require an individual complaints for each incident, there's some of the quality journalism there. They couldn't even be bothered to use Grammarly on this article before submitting it to the Prime Minister. Because each incident appears to be treated discreetly, we are concerned that the connections among cases and the connection to extremist groups will be missed, and that therefore this approach could fail to meet the threat. So because they require an individual complaint for each incident, they want to overhaul the way the prosecutorial system works and the way the police operate. So journalists who have stepped up to publicly support the complainants have themselves been targeted by abusive emails, suggesting the abuse cannot be treated simply as separate incidents, but instead warrants a comprehensive and cooperative approach across forces regardless of geography. So because they've got mean emails, they want to create an international cooperative police force that ranges between nations in some grand worldwide hunt for extremist groups. Second, we ask that police forces review and improve their respective processes for making complaints of hate speech and harassment. On several occasions, journalists from our organizations have experienced difficulty reporting incidents of harassment to police, waiting hours on the phone, and in some cases, being treated insensitively, another hate crime, or dismissively by officers, indicating that those weren't actually crimes. What do they call them in the UK? Non-crime hate incidences that show up on your job applications, on your background checks. This not only discourages victims from complaining, but adds to the already considerable trauma they're experiencing. Some of that Twitter comment PTSD. Third, we believe that greater transparency and dialogue are essential as we work toward our shared goal of keeping journalists and all targets of hate safe. In particular, we ask that a process be established whereby media organizations can provide police with summaries of multiple incidents and patterns of abuse that might not be apparent when police rely solely on the reports of individual complainants. So the media organizations are going to act like an arm of the police and start gathering evidence on civilians who dissent from their narratives. Police provide regular updates to complainants on the progress of investigations and actions taken, and to both help police and reduce the burden on complainants, media organizations be given a formal role in filing complaints on behalf of or with journalists who have become targets of hate and harassment. Again, the media organizations that are now government funded would become branches of the police force, while also fundamentally changing the way that prosecution operates in this country. Beyond law enforcement, social media platforms, which are a major channel for the dissemination of hate and harassment, bear significant responsibility for fighting this scourge. There is much room for improvement in terms of both urgency and effectiveness in how these companies respond to complaints of abuse on their platform. Facebook isn't banning enough. Twitter doesn't ban enough people. On this and other issues, policymakers too have a part to play. Hate and threats hurled at journalists have a chilling effect that is bad for democracy. That is among the reasons cited in a recent position paper prepared for the Council of Europe, so it's not just Canada, that calls on all member nations, it's all the nations in the European Union, or the Council of Europe, that might even be bigger, that calls on all member nations to pull together relevant government ministries, law enforcement agencies, social media companies, and civil society. What's the definition of fascism again? Something corporation and the state, I forget. Including journalists, to develop national plans to protect journalists and thus democracy. Several countries are well advanced in this effort. We call on the federal government to do the same for Canada. It is increasingly evident that online abuse is a growing problem for people in our industry and beyond. We have seen up close the terrible toll that such threats and hate can take. This is a profound and spreading social harm that we cannot afford to ignore and that we must find ways to counter. We all have a stake in this fight. We, the undersigned, Aboriginal People's Television Network, National News, Black Press Media, Canada Land, they actually have an okay-ish show. I heard it once, but I liked it. The Canadian Journalism Forum on Violence and Trauma. Canadian Journalism Foundation, CBC, of course. Basically all the largest newspapers, all the people you'd expect to see. Journalists for Human Rights. Media Girlfriends, I had to look that up. It's a black-owned media outlet that does podcasts. National Ethnic Press. In a different time, that would mean a very different thing. But you get down to the bottom here. You have the Honorable Marco Mendicino, a member of Parliament for the Progressive Conservative Party. Another Progressive Conservative. Progressive Conservative. Yves Blanchet, the leader of the Bloc Québécois. I think they're a fairly conservative party as well. The interim leader of the Green Party, the leader of the New Democratic Party, federal leadership candidate for the Conservative Party, another federal leadership candidate for the Conservative Party, and to prevent myself from repeating over and over again, I think those other three federal leadership Conservative Party candidates are probably the rest of the Conservative Party. Just like in Britain, the Conservatives, not so much. You can tell it's a BC paper because cannabis is one of the main topics. So I made this video to show the growing fusion of the media, the state, and private enterprises to control the flow of information. They're taking the marginalized voices narrative to the people who with the loudest voices in the entire world. The poor oppressed writers at the New York Times, the staff over at the Washington Post, the Karen NPCs that staff the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. Man, I worked on one of those places once, construction. I was building all sorts of renovation inside. Not only did they have a gym in there, but they have like the most luxury shower room I've ever seen. Down in the parkade, we built some enormous light display and like movie theater size screen. There was such enormous waste on that job, it was atrocious. Build the radio rooms here. Oh, they're done? Oh, we want them a foot or two over here. Oh no, you did them again. Okay, we want them 6 inches higher. Oh no, maybe that's a little too high. Actually, let's redo it all again. The staff there, they just give you dirty looks. They insist that you wear a reflective vest indoor, right? We're doing renovations indoor. Gotta mark you out as the construction worker. Can't have staff mistaking you as like a human or something. They were quite rude there, at least for the most part. All of those conservative and progressive conservative candidates that are signatories of this to Trudeau, along with the Green Party and all these activist outlets and NGO groups. It shows what we're up against. I mean, if I were to look into their relationship with the World Economic Forum, you think I'd find something? I already know some of them are on there, like Jagmeet Singh. I don't know since when journalists are beyond reproach. It's going to be illegal to hate journalists. I don't know how it is that the lawyers, of all people, didn't figure that one out first. Hating lawyers? No, that's illegal. You'd think if anyone could have wrangled that, it would have been them. So that's all I got, really. I should have some more free time coming up. I'd like to get a video done that I've literally been putting together for the last year now. PC it was on broke down. I've now got it, my notes and my sources spread across 3 hard drives on 3 different computers. So that'll be great putting that all together. It's about Bill Gates and Fauci, though, and some of their past works in the past pandemics they've collaborated together on. That's if something else doesn't catch my attention first. Alright, until next time. And of course the comments are closed because you know exactly what people would say about this.